Okay, now we're going to be demonstrating problems M3-3 and M3-5. Both can be found on page 123. But before we do, let's do a quick little review of expenses and when we record them. Expenses are the costs of business necessary to help you earn revenues in the period covered by the income statement. They're the resources that we've used up or consumed in the process of generating revenues. Now, when do we record them? Well, we use the expense recognition principle, sometimes called the matching principle. We record expenses in the same period as the revenues they helped to generate, regardless of when cash is paid. We try to match the expenses against the revenues to determine the net income for that period. If the expense can't be directly related to the revenue, then we record it in the same period as the underlying activity. So, July's rent expense should be recorded in July. July's wages expense should be recorded in July. Why? Well, because that's the period in which they helped you earn the revenue. Even if they weren't paid until the next month, you have to record an expense in the period you receive the benefit of the cost. Okay, now how do we record expenses? We learned in the last demonstration that revenues are recorded on the right. Well, let's review again why we have to do this. Revenues and expenses, in fact, revenues minus expenses, is how we determine our net income, which we call our earnings. Retained earnings is part of stockholders' equity. So we have to follow the same rules. Stockholders' equity is on the right side of the accounting equation, so we right side or credit to increase them. Consequently, revenues are recorded on the right. Expenses decrease earnings, consequently stockholders' equity, so they have to be recorded on the left or the debit side. Okay, now let's take a look at M3-3. The following transactions are July activities of Bill's Extreme Bowling, which operates several bowling centers. If an expense is to be recognized in July, indicate the amount. Okay, now what we're going to be asking ourselves is, did we receive the benefit of the cost in July? In A, Bill's paid $1,500 to plumbers for repairing a broken pipe in the restrooms. Well, if they repaired it in July, then you receive the benefit of that cost in July. So we'll record it as an expense in July. In B, Bill's paid $2,000 for the June electricity bill. Now let's stop there because we have two things going on in Part B. Bill's paid $2,000 for the June bill. Well, the June electricity bill, we received the benefit of the electricity in June, so we should have recorded it as an expense in June. We're just paying it now. So we will not record $2,000 for June electricity in the month of July. It should have been recorded in June. Now let's look back at B. The second half of that sentence says we received the July bill for $2,500 and we're not going to be paying it till August. Okay, the second part of that, July bill we received in July for July's electricity. Well, that should be recorded as an expense in July because that's when we receive the benefit of the cost. Okay, the last one, Bill's Extreme Bowling paid $5,475 to employees for work in July. Did we receive the benefit of their labor in July? Sure. So let's record it as an expense in July. So the question we always ask ourselves as to whether we should record an expense or not is, did we receive the benefit of the cost? Okay, so now let's take a look at the journal entries. Score this question and move on to the next one. Now we have to do journal entries for these transactions. Okay, so for the first one, Bill's Extreme Bowling paid $1,500 to plumbers for repairing a broken pipe in the restrooms. We said that we should record a repair expense because we received the work in July, so we would record it as an expense in July. Remember, expenses are recorded as debits because they're reductions in retained earnings and consequently stockholders' equity. So we're going to debit to record expenses. They decrease our earnings. They're subtracted to determine net income. And it says the word paid, so we're going to assume paid in cash. We're going to credit cash. Cash is an asset on the left side of the accounting equation, so we left side to increase or debit to increase cash. But right now we're decreasing cash, so we should be crediting. Okay, and item B. Bill's Extreme Bowling paid $2,000 for the June electricity bill. Let's stop there. In this case, you're paying for something that you would have received last month. Cash is being paid after the expense is incurred. So we're going to show a payment, a reduction in cash, but we're going to be recording a reduction in the liability that should have been recorded in June. In June, this company should have debited utilities expense for June's electricity and credited a payable because they still owed the money. Now in July, we're just recording the payment for that June bill. We need to decrease the liability accounts payable and decrease our cash. Accounts payable is going to be debited. Remember, liabilities are on the right side of the equation, so we right side our credit to increase. We're decreasing, so we debit. We're going to credit cash because cash is on the left side of the accounting equation. We left side to increase, we want to decrease, so we're going to do the opposite. So this is an example of something that was paid the month after the expense was recorded. Now let's look at the second half of that sentence. We received the July bill, which will be paid in August. Now remember, we are in July. These are July activities. You receive the bill for July electricity. Well, July electricity should be recorded as an expense in July, right? So we're going to debit utilities expense. Expenses are debited because they decrease stockholders' equity. When we when we calculate net income, it's revenues minus expenses. So earnings get reduced by expenses. And earnings are part of stockholders' equity, so it has to follow the same rules. It's on the right side of the accounting equation, so we right side our credit to increase, and we left side or debit to decrease. We're receiving the bill, but it's not going to be paid in August or July. It's going to be paid in August. So we're going to have to put this in accounts payable. Liabilities are on the right side of the accounting equation, so we're going to right side our credit to increase. So this is an example where you receive the benefit of the cost, but you're not paying it until later. If you receive the benefit of the cost in the current period, record an expense in the current period. Finally, we're recording the payment of $5,475 to employees for work in July. Did you receive the benefit of the cost in July? Yes, we received their labor. So we're going to debit salaries and wages expense in July because we received the benefit of the cost in July. And it says record the payment, so we're assuming they're paid in cash. We'll credit to reduce cash, $5,475. Let's take a look at the journal entries in total. A and C both involve situations where we're receiving the benefit of the cost and paying the cash in the same period, in July. B1 is an example where you're now paying for something you already received the benefit of the cost in the previous period. So you're reducing your liability and paying out the money that you owe. In B2, you're receiving a bill, but you're not going to pay it right away. You have to record the expense in the period that you receive the benefit. July's electricity should be recorded as an expense in July. And then we credit accounts payable. Remember, what we're trying to do is match the expenses against the revenues that they help to create to determine whether we were profitable during that month. Okay, we're all done with this example. You can go on to some practice problems yourself to practice or on to your homework problems if you prefer.